Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dog Trainers Podcast. Thank you guys for listening. My name is Mariano, that's Brent. And before we start here, we just wanted to give a quick shout out to some of our awesome listeners because we've noticed we've been getting a lot of love in Portland, Oregon, Anchorage, Alaska, of course, beautiful Los Angeles, Columbus, Ohio, as well as people abroad. We've got a lot of listeners in Canada, Australia, Germany, Ecuador, Panama. And we just want to thank you guys and let you know that we appreciate you and we're keeping up on you. And we hope that we're bringing you as much value as humanly possible. Now, for everyone else, if you want to reach out to us, you can do so by reaching out to us at Dog Trainers Podcast. That's all one word. That goes for Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, as well as all major podcast platforms. With that, let's dive in. This is episode 25, dealing with clients when it comes to crate training. How you doing, bud?
I'm doing great, man. How you doing, Mariano?
Pretty good, pretty good. You want to set things off?
Yeah, let's set things off. Well, again, as Mariano said, guys, thank you guys for listening. And today we're talking about a really great topic because every time we deal with a younger dog trainer or someone who's asking us questions, we always run into obstacles around the concept of crate training. Now, we got so much love from our last episode dealing with clients with aggressive dogs. Like we literally have the most downloads of an episode in the shortest amount of time that we've ever gotten before. So someone is finding value on this. Someone is sharing it. If you guys haven't checked it out yet, go ahead and check it out. It's episode 24. So we decided to come back with a dealing with clients about crate training, right? Because as you know, as dog trainers, you guys know that sometimes you can get a lot of pushback. Sometimes it doesn't make sense to clients right away. Even though we know as professionals that crating your dog or confinement training your dog has huge value, that sometimes it's hard to explain to clients. So we're going to do our best to teach you guys kind of how we deal with this before, how we deal with it during, and how we deal with this after.
Yeah. Before we dive in, can I just say that I think you're absolutely right about that. So I have a friend, again, for those of you who may not know, I live in Arizona in like the Phoenix area, and it be hot as hell around here. So it's currently too hot to just take dogs outside. So when I want to work dogs and they're good enough, I take them inside, like Petco, Home Depot, stuff like that. So I end up going to the Petco a lot because I just work dogs there. Mm-hmm. And I know one of the trainers there is a real nice guy. And we were talking about this the other day. And I'm honestly kind of amazed how many people have a hard time with the crate. Like a lot of training tools, I get it. I get the reluctance of an e-collar. I get the reluctance of like a prong collar, a star mark. But a crate, even though I know there are some people out there, obviously, who take issue with it, I guess I just really underestimated the sheer amount of people that have a hard time with it. Maybe it's just me. But yeah, I mean, with that being said, we wanted to start talking about why people tend to feel bad, what that is. And just when it comes to dealing with clients, how can you go about getting them to understand that it's insanely beneficial for the dog in so many ways?
Yeah. And I think just as we approach anything that is emotionally controversial for clients, I think it's really important for us as dog trainers to have as much empathy and as much compassion for the situation that they're in. If we can't put ourselves in the owner's shoes, it's going to be really, really hard to connect. My dad's a physician, and I remember when I was a kid, I used to go help him at his office. And he always had a sign right above his computer where he worked, and the sign read, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Exactly, until they know how much you care. And so this has always kind of been a revolving mantra in my head. So when dealing with clients with really sensitive subjects, it's important for us to really dive into how people feel, why they feel that way, so that we can connect with it and help kind of guide them towards the right direction, because we know as trainers it's going to help benefit them and their dog's psychological states tremendously. All right. So let's go into it. Why do clients feel bad, Mariano?
I think, a big thing of why clients feel bad from my experience is they tend to think of it like it's jail. They tend to think of it like the dog sees it as a bad thing. And I've actually gotten a lot of calls about exactly this in like the past couple of days. So this has just been on my brain lately anyway. Mm-hmm. And, a lot of the words that they use are extremely telling. I think when we talk about any episode that we do when it comes to dealing with clients, I would really encourage people to pay attention to the words that clients use, like how they describe something. Mm-hmm. And so they'd be like, he was being bad, so I put him in his crate, or like, I feel bad because I feel like I just rescued him and I don't want him to feel like I'm abandoning him. I don't want him to feel like he's back in a kennel in a shelter and this and that. Mm-hmm. And so I've noticed that lately, what I've been getting a lot of is younger puppies, and the owners feel bad because naturally puppies, of course, want to be with you all the time. And so they'll whine.
True.
And they're like, well, he's sad. He misses me. I don't want him to feel like I don't love him. I don't want him to like have this estranged relationship with me.
Right. Right. 100%. Other things also that we see is a lot of times with dog owners, this may be their first puppy, right? Like I think one of my biggest audiences at my age and my profession, and also just being a millennial, are other millennials who this is their first dog as an adult, right? And also another thing that we see is a lot of people come from homes with yards with dogs, right? So many times we hear this story where you go, yeah, I had dogs when I was a kid. We had a yard, or we lived on a ranch, or we lived on a farm, or we just lived in the suburbs and the dog lived outside or had a dog run or whatever it was. And so sometimes they as a young person getting a dog for the first time, maybe starting a new family, we have this schematic in our head of like, dogs deserve space. Dogs deserve freedom. Dogs are happiest when they have a lot of room, because this is ultimately what we experienced when we were kids, right? So naturally, the thought of creating our dogs or isolating them in general doesn't make sense. And so it's our job as dog trainers to teach them how development works and how we can develop like long-term strategies to make it so that your dog can eventually have more freedom in the house. And so that we can kind of work closer and closer. Now, me specifically in LA, we deal with a lot of people who aren't from LA, who moved to LA from maybe the Midwest, the East Coast. And so I hear this story a lot. These dogs their dogs growing up had a lot of space. And so especially during COVID, we're getting a lot of people who now that they say, okay, now I have a lot of time, I'm going to get a puppy, but I want my puppy to have freedom, right? Because how else is my puppy going to learn to have freedom unless I give them freedom? This is what makes sense in their heads. And so we're starting to see this. And also what happens is in LA, we see that a lot of people live in apartments, condos, like they live in very, very close quarters to other people, right? I worked in West LA for 10 years, and then I actually live in the Valley. And even just over, like down the freeway a little bit, 20 minutes, we see a huge culture difference, right? People in West LA live in apartments. They have to walk their dogs to go poop and pee. In essence, they're more confined naturally versus people in the Valley. They have yards, and their dogs go on hikes and hiking trails regularly. So it's a little bit different lifestyle. However, there are places for crates in different stages of development, in different lifestyles that people live. And our job is to kind of explain that to them.
Yeah. And that's a big thing that interests me when it comes to crate training is the issues that can arise if you don't crate train a dog. And, when we were drafting up this episode, kind of like last time we talked about, like we love to draft things out and make sure that we can really maximize like value for people. So of course, puppies, I mean, what's a more prime candidate for crate training than a puppy for all the reasons that we'll get into. But also there are dogs with some more serious stuff going on. There are dogs who have like severe separation anxiety, dogs that can be reactive to strangers in the house, dogs that can be fighting with other dogs in the house. There's so many reasons why crate training is a hugely viable option, especially LA, because I lived in LA too. I'm from LA, I recently moved, but I totally agree with you that there are a ton of people that aren't from there. And there are also a ton of people that just by the nature of LA, people work hard, stuff is expensive, including rent, so on. So I found a lot of like roommate situations of, younger people, 2-3 people in like a 3-bedroom apartment. All of them younger people, all of them because they're younger, like totally believe in like, we should rescue dogs and save them, which is great. So they adopt the like quote unquote unadoptables, right? Like the big pity shepherd mix, the big, whatever mix.
Yeah. The one missing an eye, the one missing a leg.
Yeah. Right. But when we kind of get back into the whole, like why people feel bad, I find this a lot. People with rescue dogs, especially when it comes to crating and or correcting in any sort of form, they love to make up backstories for the dog that make excuses as to why they don't crate them. Oh, well, I adopted him. I don't want him to feel bad. I don't want to like hurt his, they have this idea of like, I need to shield this dog from any sort of negativity, including the crate. And I'm like, I can understand where you're coming from, except that your dog just went after your roommate, which is why you called me here today.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
exactly.
And, and I'm like, you have to understand just how much benefit could come from crate training your dog, not just crating your dog, crate training your dog. And I think that, I want to hear you riff a little bit about like the difference there, because I think that that's a big failing in trainers that I notice a lot. Like trainers don't always have the words to explain the difference. It's like, you don't just put the dog away. There's so much more benefit to it. And there's so much more active work that you do to really gain from the crate.
Yeah. I think so. Crate training, like those dog trainers who have been doing this for a couple of years or a lot of years, there are things that we know the crate provides benefit. And I'll just do a little checklist, right? Sure. So we know that like in puppy raising, that crating is great for routine development, right? So what's the easiest way to teach a puppy the right behaviors is to control how much freedom that they have, right? So it's easier for me to teach a dog to eat all his food if I feed him in the crate. It's easier for me to teach a dog to chew on a bone and not get distracted if I feed him in the crate. It's easier for me to teach the dog to relax in a passive form if I crate him anytime after activities, right? Mm-hmm. So it's also easier for me to make sure my dog's not chewing or destroying anything if my dog is confined or crated, be it in a puppy pen, a crate, a laundry room, a kitchen, doesn't matter, right? But isolation in general is how we teach dogs to not develop bad habits, right? Every dog trainer agrees on this, right? Mm-hmm. However, we also know that there's different types of people out there, there's different types of personalities, there's different types of puppies who crate training or confinement work might be a little bit more difficult than others, right? Let's say for the rescue dog, for example. I hear this story a lot. I hear, as you mentioned, people might come up with embellished stories of rescues. They might say like, oh, the dog was caged in a rescue for 10 years, or he was in a kennel for, or not 10 years, like a year or 6 months. Or they'll say something like, the last owner would keep this dog in the crate all day, and I don't want to do that to this dog, right? And so an interesting thing just on that subject, if the dog has been in the crate all day since he was a puppy and you rescue that dog, that actually tells me that dog's actually really used to the crate.
Right.
And just on a separate note, I kind of blame those Sarah McLachlan videos, the ones that the
SPCA videos,
the one that was like in the eyes of an angel far away. I blame
the dog is like,
and he's just like panting in slow motion. So I kind of blame those because those do really leave an imprint on our brains. Because we see the sadness, or we see these dogs caged up or locked up in a kennel, and it does this emotional thing, right? And it's really easy to kind of relay our own, like empathize a little too much with those dogs in that scenario, which is a fucked up scenario. They're caged up in bad environments, but when you're in a crate in an air conditioned beautiful 1,000 square foot apartment with beautiful furniture and loving owners, it's a very different story.
Yeah. And and you touched on something actually that I'm glad you brought up, because it kind of jogged my memory to a really interesting point, because you're right. Those videos are sad, but it's the magic of editing. It's not that the dogs are sad, and like, of course, with like music and slow-mo and so, that's like, even when I watch the straight up movies, like I'm a big horror movie fan, and John Carpenter was like, yo, Halloween sucked until we put the piano sound on it. And then it was like the best horror movie ever, So I only bring that up to say, like we say it jokingly, but don't let owners feel bad because of that kind of thing. Those dogs were in messed up situations. In a loving home with a loving parent, crate training has a ton of value, and the crate itself doesn't have a negative connotation, or it shouldn't.
Yeah.
But if you make it look sad, you can probably make anything look sad.
Yeah.
Right. And then the other thing was just, we were talking about puppies and all the benefit and stuff of crate training there, which I totally agree with all of it, like the whole, the potty training, the crate training, chew training. But then we talk about dogs that maybe like those ASPCA dogs that already might have a certain set of issues and things that they need to work on. There's other benefits, a lot of which I talked about like in a blog post that I did a couple of years back that's on my website that was, like you said, people kind of personify the dogs, which I guess they did for a commercial, but in real life, they do it a lot, and it doesn't necessarily benefit the dog. And I think of dogs like, I've had a couple clients, and I know you have too, that let's say their dog has so much separation anxiety that they bust out of a glass window of the house,
Yeah,
or they,
true.
you know, I think of Brent and I trained a dog named Taco. Shout out to Ronnie and Doug.
What's that?
Who was so anxious that she would not only bend her way out of the crate, but then eat her way out of the room of their new house, and then like sometimes get out. And even if she didn't get out of the house, chewing on all kinds of drywall and stuff can't be good for the dogs. And you know, there's
Not at all.
there's just so much opportunity there from a trainer's perspective when dealing with a client to help them understand it doesn't do the dog any good to over personify them. I know they're your babies and everything, but they are not like actual babies. They're dogs, and they need things that dogs need. And it's your job as an owner to set your own emotions aside in order to give them what they actually need from you. That's what a good parent does.
Right. 100%. 100%.